Why, hello there. My name is Mountain, and today I'd like to talk to you about this. And what is this, you might ask? Well, this, my friends, is the NB Air and the N-Link 10 by Nitecore. Nitecore is a Guangzhou-based manufacturer of flashlights, mobile batteries, chargers, and much more. As the name Air might suggest, this is a very compact and very lightweight mobile battery designed for lightweight charging and quick top-ups on the go. And its main claim to fame is that it is very small and compact. It weighs just under 90 grams, but still provides enough usable charge to get your phone or other small devices to a useful state under most conditions. It's shock resistant, water resistant, and very lightweight, which makes it perfect for hiking. It has a decent output voltage and a decent recharging speed via its single USB-C input on there. And it can also charge low current devices, so things that have like low current draws that might not otherwise be fully supported by some other batteries. This one will take care of that. And this N-Link 10 is just a very short magnetic USB-C charging cable that pairs really well with it, though it is sold separately. Now, the opportunities for improvement on the NB Air is probably that the labeled capacity of 5,000 milliamps is actually a little bit misleading. If you go to the back and you kind of read more carefully, you'll see that the rated actual usable capacity is 3,300 milliamps, and that regardless of whether you take the nominal 5,000 or the actual usable 3,300, I think it just has a very limited capacity. Like this is has to obey the laws of physics, and there's only so much the battery chemistry can support. So this is not a dedicated, full, heavy duty kind of like battery pack. It's one for kind of lightweight top-ups along the way. It doesn't have a built-in charging cable, which is less convenient than some of the other alternatives out there. Though, as I mentioned, it pairs quite well with this N-Link 10, which is similarly quite tiny there. And I think some people might consider the fact that it only has a single USB-C port and no USB-A port, for example, or no two USB-C ports, to be a shortcoming or a negative of this. That is a valid position, but I think kind of given the very limited capacity of this battery, there's just a limit to like how much you're going to be simultaneously charging from this. Obviously, no two ports means there's no such thing as pass-through charging. Again, I think a limited battery like this is going to be, a limited capacity battery like this is going to be less important. Now, kind of a quick overview and disclaimer of this. It retails for $39.95 US. It's available in one color and one size and capacity. This nominally 5,000 milliamp, 3,300 milliamp usable capacity in this sort of carbon fiber and plastic frame. It's available over on nitecore.com. I'll leave some links in the description below. And it doesn't come with any kind of charging cable or anything like that, or an adapter, USB-C, USB-A adapter, so you're going to have to supply your own cable. This N-Link 10, as I mentioned, is sold separately, retails for $12.95. It's available in one color and one length, which is like this yellow and black thing that you see here. And I think it kind of matches, really well with the kind of like design and style of this battery here. Now, kind of a disclaimer is like I've been using this charger and this cable for a couple of months now, and I've had the opportunity to put it through several pretty decent outdoor adventures. It's also kind of been my go-to kind of like sling bag charger. Those of you who've been watching my channel for a while might have seen this pop up in a few of my different kind of like sling bag reviews from time to time. That said, like this battery and this battery and this cable were sent over by Nitecore for review. So as always, all opinions are my own, and Nitecore doesn't get any input into this. They don't get to see this or anything before it goes live. They don't even know when it's going to go live. But I did want to just call out that this was sent over for a review. So talking very briefly about the technical specs of this battery, the weight is just under 90 grams. So if we pull out our trusty little scale here and put it on here, you can see it's just around 88.6 grams. And if we were to take this N-Link 10 and put it on there, that's right around 11.4. If you take off the cap, because you don't really need the cap, it drops the weight down to an even 10. So if you were to put these things together, you're just around 98.2, 98.3, add in the cap, and just 0.1 shy of 100. So that's a pretty, good place to be if you're looking for like a really lightweight, small use battery. I'll talk a little bit about what I see as sort of like the use cases for a battery of this kind of limited capacity, but very small weight in a little while here. The size is 112 millimeters by 48 millimeters by just under 10, it's like 9.7 millimeters. And the output is written on the back here, but it's going to be 18 watts total, 18 watts max. So at 5.5 volts, you're at 2.4 amps, 9 volts, 2 amps, and then 12 volts, 1.5 amps. So I think that's a pretty useful range for most generally available kind of small item consumer electronics that you would be likely to charge with a product like this. It has, you guys said, this 5,000 milliamp nominal, 3,300, actual usable kind of capacity on there. And it has 4 charging lights that kind of show you its status, corresponds to roughly 25% on each of those, and then 1 single in and out USB-C port here. The water resistance on this is IPX7 rating, which means it can be submerged in water up to 3 feet for as long as 30 minutes, but it's not rated for dust protection. I found this pretty useful for, like I said, hiking, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But if you're like in a super dusty environment, like in the US, like, desert areas or something like that, or where there's a lot of sand or whatever, this might not be the best choice for you. But I think for a lot of folks in more temperate climates where accidental moisture exposure is a bigger concern, I would say this is a pretty good, choice there. And as I also mentioned, it supports lower power like device trickle charging. The N-Link, as I showed you, weighs just around 9-10 grams. It's 130 millimeters when extended here from tip to tip. This is 130 millimeters, so just a little bit longer than that, which I find to be a super useful length. And I'll show you how I use this to kind of charge my phone in a little bit here. The power supported is 60 watts max and 3 amps max current there. So let's talk a little bit about the exterior design and materials. It's very sleek and slim, as I told you. It's very easy to pocket anywhere. So go inside of a jeans pocket or like even a shirt pocket. And as I said, it fits really nicely inside of a sling. And I'll show you that in a little bit here. It's got this kind of like carbon fiber look thing with like matte plastic on there. I like it. I think it looks very clean and slim and sort of in line with a lot of the other kind of Nitecore design language on there. And as I mentioned, that water resistance is, quite useful actually. Like I keep it in my outside, like back when I'm hiking, I'll keep this like in one of the outside pockets on my, like a hip pouch or something like that on my backpack. So it'll sometimes get wet when it's raining or whatever, and it's still okay. That said, you should definitely dry it carefully before you like plug in your devices to avoid any potential shorts. The cable itself is very low profile and small, so compact. I love it. Like there's a lot of like keychain type USB cables that are sort of similarly designed. This one doesn't have a keychain attachment. It just has this sort of little rubber cap thing here that just kind of press fits into here, into the USB ends there. But it also has magnets. So how do they work? I don't know. It's a mystery to mankind. But anyway, those kind of help keep this together so you don't even need that end cap there. And it's a really nice little short length, which I love. It's got this kind of flat cable, which is covered with fabric, which is very nice to the touch and I think helps with the robustness there. There is no place to kind of store this cap though, so you gotta be careful you don't lose it when you're actually using this to charge here. So let's talk about this battery in use really quickly, like starting with, maybe the obvious, which is like charging your phone, which is how I expect a lot of people will be using this battery. So you just plug it into here. You can see this phone's already at 100%, but you can see it immediately starts charging. And I really like how, it's so flat. You can just kind of lay it against the bottom like that, and it just sort of lays like that. This part obviously sticks out a little bit, but I still think it's quite, quite nice and compact, both for usage. You could drop it inside of a bag and just leave it to charge like this. Obviously, you can use a larger cable if you want a longer cable if you want to like charge it, and have it snake out into a front pocket or whatever. I'll talk about the detailed charge times and all that in a little bit here, but basically you can expect this thing to charge your phone from anywhere from like 50 to 90% of the phone's total capacity, depending on the size of your phone, the quality, how hot or cold it is out there. If you're charging from something starting really low, like 10%, or starting from something really high, like 50%, etc. All these things will affect that. But like I said, it's good for like a top up. It'll get your phone to a very useful state no matter where you're starting from, but it's probably not going to get you from 0 to 100% in almost any modern phone there. One thing I did observe is just, at least for the iPhone 15 Pro Max, it only happened for me on the iPhone 15 Pro Max, but I noticed that when I was starting to charge from like a really deeply discharged state, like 10% or so, the battery would sometimes cut out, even though like around like, it would just turn off, it would stop charging when the phone had reached like 40% or so, even though there was still plenty of charge left on the battery. So then I had to like, press the button again, then it would start charging again. This didn't happen in other phones, and it also didn't happen when I started charging like the iPhone from like a 40 or 50% state. Then it would just charge all the way full or until the battery was depleted. So that might be just a little, quirk of that combination of things, but something I wanted to mention. Like I said, you just gotta press the button again. I also noticed that it tends to keep its charge fairly decently in storage. I left it in my bag fully charged, but then untouched for a week, and it still had all 4 bars here. Obviously, there's a little bit of imprecision if you only have 4 bars of granularity, but that was quite useful for me, and I think it kind of works well. Like I said, it's sort of like leave it in your sling or leave it almost like a little emergency thing in there. The 4 lights also will light up when the battery is charging, and then it blinks, and then it's done when it's done charging. So I mentioned several times that this works really well inside of a sling or something like that. Here I have the Peak Design 2-liter outdoor sling. This is where I usually kind of leave it, and like it's got a little pocket, and what I usually do is I'll just drop it inside of here. You can see it's super compact, fits in that little back pocket. It takes up almost no space, and it's always there ready to go, and that's just so super convenient, right? Just right inside of there. Now, I do wish, like I said, again, that this was sort of integrated, but it's so tiny enough that, like you can just drop it anywhere. You don't really notice that it's like a little coin or another little widget or whatever. You can drop it in a pocket or something like this. And, you can see I have it here with a wallet and a coin pouch and whatever, and it doesn't, it stacks up really nicely. It doesn't take up hardly any space inside of here. Really good for, just EDC sling use, and I love the tiny size. And I think for kind of, especially sling users, like you're usually using a sling when you're out just for a day. So it's very rare that you'd be out for a day and you still need like, a massive battery to charge multiple things. I think those are 2 very like different kind of use cases. If you're gonna be, you're doing like the power thing in the cafe, you're gonna be in the cafe for 6 or 8 hours just working, whatever, you need a bigger, you're gonna be carrying a backpack and a computer and then like a big battery. That's like one use case. But if you're usually rocking a sling, like you're usually kind of out light and fast for the day, and you see something to top you up just in case, this is perfect. Just enough weight and size to handle the job, but not like overkill and all this unused capacity here. I also mentioned that it's super useful for hiking, and that's what one of the really attractive use cases for this. Like, like I said, I think it's both robust, very lightweight, water resistant, and provides enough charge to keep you going in like a 2-day, 1-night thing. And I think for me at least, I tend to use like, a GPS watch or something like that for my maps. So usually there's no signal. So I have my phone on airplane mode. So I'm not really using that much charge from my phone, but, still at night, you might, listen to some music while you fall asleep or be taking some photos with your phone from here to there. So like, just in case you want to have enough charge, you don't want to go without a battery and you're trying to be lightweight. So you want like a small enough battery that'll get you your phone charged up in an emergency or top it up for the next day to hike back out. But not, this big thing that's going to weigh you down. I think this is super useful for that. I've mentioned at this point a few times that this thing is very water resistant. So here I have some water, and then you just go ahead and drop that inside of there. You can see the lights are still, well, let me see if I can do this here. Lights are still on here, still operating. And then we're gonna take it out here. I suggest, like if you, drop it in water that you should, dry it out thoroughly. I'm gonna go give this a good shake off screen here real quick. You wanna just make sure as much as possible that you're wiping off all of the, all of the moisture or whatever. I still have a little bit of moisture on here. Most importantly, out of the port here. Here. I realized I just wiped that off screen, so maybe you're like, you don't believe me that this is actually the same one. So let me dry it on here so you can see it is definitely the same one that I immersed in water here. I'm gonna use a Q-tip. You can use obviously a towel or whatever. So just shake this out a little bit like this. And then we're gonna go ahead and plug this in to here and bring our phone back over. And you can see here, watch the charge indicator. There we go. There we are. We are now charging on here. So, like I said, I don't go out of my way to get this thing wet, but I have found that it handles very well when it gets incidentally wet. And so for me, that's, like I said, super attractive as a hiking battery. And I just love that about this thing here. So all of that having been said, one of the things that I think, a lot of people, call out about this, and I've also mentioned it, is the actual capacity. So the battery says it is NB Air 5000 milliamps, which sounds like a lot, but if you flip it around on the back, you're like, oh, it's actually 3,300 usable capacity. That's because the output voltages are different. Let me be clear. The internal nominal voltage and the actual output voltage are different, which thus affects the actual capacity. And I'm not a battery scientist, so I'm going to give you my consumer take on this here. For comparison, a regular iPhone 16 is like about 3,561 milliamps. An iPhone 15 Pro Max is about 4,400 milliamps, and like something like the Asus ROG Phone 9 Pro is like 5,800 milliamps. So, like I said, you're looking at like an actual usable capacity at 5 volts or whatever at 3,300 milliamps. What that means is you're going to get anywhere from 50 to 90% of your phone's capacity, lower if it's really cold, lower if your phone's starting at a really deep, deeply discharged state or whatever. And I already mentioned that for the iPhone, when I'm starting at like a really deeply discharged state, it would sometimes cut off at like 40% or so, even though the battery was still kind of, had a lot of charge that I had to push the button on, etc. So kind of thinking about the overall, like capacities and timing and all of that, like I wasn't sure if I wanted to go like super analytical and quantitative on this. I'm not really set up to do that kind of testing. So what I thought I would do is I would just share how from the same framing as how I evaluate products for myself as a purchase decision, which is like my observed real world impacts here. I've got on the screen, some of my, like I did a few different tests here with different phones, and I got some time lapses on here. Sort of the base stats on this is like for an iPhone 15 Pro Max, at a battery health in good condition, it went from like 10% to 39% in 21 minutes, and then like I mentioned, the battery cut off at 39%, even though the battery was still full. So I pushed it again, and it would charge normally. And this happened every time with this one. An iPhone 15 Pro Max, when I started from like 46% to 100%, so you're looking at about 64% charge. You're looking at about an hour and 22 minutes, but it still had just around 2 bars of charge left. Again, that's a very non-granular, kind of 25% increments. That could be anywhere from, 30% to 50%. And then recharging the battery itself, 30-watt charger, it drew 17.8 watts on average, and it went from 2 bars to full in just, under, I'll put the time on here. I forgot exactly what it was. I'll put the time on there. And so for me, these are very like useful and usable kind of like numbers in line for what I expect for a battery of this size and within the use cases that I mentioned. I was really curious about this nominal versus like actual capacity. So I asked Nitecore like why this battery was labeled 5,000 milliamps instead of 3,300. And this is, I'm going to quote verbatim what they told me. The 5,000 milliamps refers to the battery cell's nominal capacity, which is the theoretical charge at the internal voltage of the battery, e.g. 3.88 volts. This is a standard industry metric used to compare power banks. The 3,300 milliamps is the rated capacity, which refers to the actual usable capacity after conversion losses when the output is stepped up to 5 volts for USB charging. What that means, as I said, is like, the minimum it can charge is at 5 volts at 2.4 amps. So not the internal 3.88 volts, voltage there. So that's why you get a lower kind of output on there. I think, this is a kind of world where there's no exact standard in how you want to label your thing. So there are manufacturers that will use this nominal capacity. There are manufacturers that'll just be straight up dishonest about it. There are manufacturers that'll, use the actual usable capacity. You just kind of have to kind of look at that and be very careful when you're kind of searching for these products like this. So finally, that brings me to like the for and not for this. Like, I think this is a great battery for ultralight hikers on overnight short expeditions. Like I said, this is like where this thing shines. Robust, lightweight, highly water resistant, enough charge to get your phone topped up for the next day without like carrying extra bulk that you're not going to use. I think this is a great option for people who are looking for like an emergency EDC use thing. Like I said, it tends to keep its charge pretty decently. You still should top it up from time to time. Very small size means it's totally unobtrusive and can live like in a small sling or bag or purse or whatever. You'll just drop it in there and forget it, and pair it with this little cable, and you'll always have a solution there. I think it's obviously a great choice for like EDC sling users. Like I showed you earlier, that's how I use this one besides hiking, and I love it. It's just big enough for that kind of use case without weighing you down with stuff you don't need or capacity you don't need. Conversely, I don't think it's a great choice for like multi-day outdoor expeditions. It doesn't have enough capacity. It won't even charge a single modern smartphone to completely full from 0, which is, right? If you're going if you're hiking the PCT or whatever, whatever, like you need a larger battery. And Nitecore makes other batteries that I think are actually good solutions for that, but that will be a kind of a separate video. It's also not a great choice for regular or power, so to speak, power users of battery banks. case. It's pretty much just for charging one phone or perhaps one flashlight or one earbud one at a time with a single port here. Isn't going to charge your laptop or your tablet, just doesn't have that output or that capacity. Isn't going to charge multiple devices at once. So if you need that, you need like a much more heavier duty, like larger battery there. And finally, it's not obviously a good choice for the USB-A homies because, like, you know, it only has a USB-C port on there. And the N-Link 10, I think, is a really handy, cute little cable. I love the magnetic part. You know, I think it obviously pairs really well with this, but anybody else who's looking for like an emergency kind of occasional use USB charging cable, I think this is a good one. It doesn't have, like I said, hook for or a ring for your keychain, but you could actually loop it through here and put this cap on there. The cap is press fit, but it tends to be relatively robust. So if you're in the market for, you know, battery like this, lightweight battery like this, what are some other, you know, options that you might want to consider? So first and foremost, or I don't know, first and foremost, but the one that I used to use a lot before I started using this one is this Mophie. It's the Power Station Mini. It is got the same kind of 4 light feature. It's the same single USB in and out port here. Does not come with, or it doesn't have a built-in cable here. It's made of metal, significantly thicker, though albeit shorter than the Nitecore, and it is heavier. So we bring our scale out here. You can see this one is, you know, 122 versus the Nitecore, which is, you know, 88.8 there. So significantly heavier, a little bit chunkier. It has the same, it's gonna be a little bit hard to see on camera here. It has the same kind of rated nominal 5,000 milliamp internal capacity at 3.6 volts, I think it says. But again, the output charge, the minimum is 5 volts to 3 amps. So it's going to be roughly, maybe a little bit less theoretically than actual usable capacity as this one here. Again, the laws of physics are what they are. I've had mixed experiences with Mophie products, particularly the battery products. Some of them have just kind of like died on me after a few weeks use. This one has been going for a year or two at this point. So I think that's fine, but it is something to maybe keep in mind. But I did like how kind of compact and small it was, though this one is more compact and smaller. Another option that I use a lot is Anker. I quite like Anker products. So this is going to be the Anker Power Core 3 5K. Anker tends to like change their products a lot. Like they have a very, like they're always introducing new products, deprecating other ones, but they generally have usually something of like this size and form factor here. This one's also 5,000 milliamps at 3 point something internal. Same thing, you're gonna have around the same kind of usable capacity as this one. This one weighs 112, so again, slightly heavier than this one. Has 2 ports, USB-C and USB-C and USB-A, which is going to be a boon for the USB-A homies. And you got the same kind of like 4 charging ports on there. This one came with a USB-C cable. I don't know if the new ones still do or not. Like I said, Anker tends to change like their products and packaging a lot. I've had really good experiences with Anker for the most part. I think some of their larger, their very largest batteries I've had some problems with, like the very big, like 26, 30,000, etc. capacity. The smaller ones I've always had good experiences with. So I would say as long as you're buying in this range, you're going to be in good hands with Anker. This is the Anker Nano Power Bank 30 watt. It has a built-in USB-C cable, which sort of does this little tail thing here. They show you can kind of carry it like this. I would not personally do that, but it does kind of, you know, it's nice like this. It's a chunky beast, has 2 USB-C, a USB-A port plus this one, so you have lots of charging options. It has a screen that you can turn on here, shows you how much charge remaining, and when you plug it in to charge something, it shows you, you know, like how the charge situation is going and what it's charging at, etc. like this, which I think is a super nice touch. Now, it is significantly chunkier and larger than the Nitecore, and it comes in at 214.4 grams, which is significantly heavier than the Nitecore. Though again, you know, it comes with a screen and built-in charging cable and multiple ports or whatever. Kind of intermediary between like a really big full-sized, full-featured bank and then something super lightweight but with like limited feature set here. And then maybe the last one, a little bit of a edge case here, but it is a thing here. So this is an 18650 battery. This is a very niche kind of, or relatively niche kind of battery. I have more of these than I would like to, primarily because I use them for like, you know, power my Raspberry Pis and some of those like little, you know, pieces of hardware that I tinker around with. The pros are they're quite light. If we were to bring this thing over here, again, if you drop this on here, you're like at half the weight. Again, half the capacity. This one's only 2600 milliamps, but there are slightly larger capacities of these, though there are not that large of capacities. You gotta be careful with this. They're often used in kind of like these new LED flashlights. Some of the new ones come with a built-in USB-C port that you can charge from and charge them with decent-ish capacity. So some ultralight hikers will like use this, bring one of these as kind of like a super lightweight emergency top-up or whatever. There's some downsides to these. The biggest one is like they may explode and kill you. They're also very hard to like source a high quality one that won't burn down your house. Basically, these are, like I said, you have to, like I keep all of mine in special bags in case they are to explode or whatever. If you get a high quality one, they're great. I source mine from a couple of, this is a Japanese manufactured one. There's, you know, AnyVolt makes a high quality one. Panasonic or whatever used to as well, but there's a lot of like really dodgy manufacturers out there that sell you ones at capacities that are impossible for the form factor and they'll like burn down your house, start a fire or whatever. But just a thing I would mention here, because I do like that these come with like a USB port, though many of them are charge only. Some of them will charge out as well. Something to keep in mind. And so really that is it. If you have any questions about this battery, go ahead and leave those in the comments below. And if I can, I will answer them. If you have anything that you would like me to review, please leave those in the comments below. If I can, I will review them. Thank you very much.